Well, there's change. There's change around the Pittsburgh Steelers, but it now appears there's one part of change that many of us expected that won't happen. And I'm here to tell you why that change needs to happen, especially with the opportunities the Pittsburgh Steelers have to really change for next season. This is another edition of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm coming at you from the Beaver County Auto Studios up above Market Square here in downtown Pittsburgh. I am Mike Asti, and by all reports now, based on a conversation earlier today we had with Mike Tomlin and based on what we're hearing now, based on what Jeremy Fowler's now reporting off of that conversation, it now appears Keith Butler is not going to be fired, and Keith Butler is going to get another season to kind of right the wrong that has been his last few years as defensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Right here, Jeremy Fowler covering the Steelers for ESPN. Steelers coach Mike Tomlin had a productive meeting with DC Keith Butler as part of his postseason sessions with his staff. Nothing official, but it wouldn't surprise to see return of Butler, who has 1 year left on his deal. And he's not the only one reporting that. It now appears, and the longer we go into all the change around the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the longer we go without this move being made, it now appears the Steelers are probably going to be retaining Keith Butler, and he'll be back as defensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Well, I touched on this last week. I touched on the show that kind of went viral here for Pittsburgh Sports Live after the Joey Porter firing and that first domino to fall in the change of this offseason for the Pittsburgh Steelers, that Keith Butler had to go. Keith Butler has to go. Keith Butler has to be the guy. Last year, he was able to kind of hide behind the shadows of Todd Haley. Todd Haley got most of the blame in terms of assistant coaches with the Steelers. Todd Haley got most of the venom around Pittsburgh Steelers fans underneath Mike Tomlin. And the Steelers lost in the second round of the playoffs after a 13-win season, a team that early in the year struggled offensively and then picked it up and was able to have another season of putting points on the board, but yet lost in the second round to the Jacksonville Jaguars and Blake Bortles. Why did they lose that game? Blake Bortles and the Jacksonville Jaguars ran up and down the field against Keith Butler's defense. And yes, maybe you give them a mulligan last year because of the Ryan Shazier injury. So most of their rankings last year were maybe dipped or maybe better than they could have been or would have been without Ryan Shazier the whole year. Maybe they dipped second half of the season defensively and had that collapse in the postseason defensively because they're without Ryan Shazier. And that's a big loss. It's absolutely a big loss. But the main reason why they lost that second round playoff game to the Jacksonville Jaguars was because of the defense collapsing. It was a defensive problem in that game. I don't care what's going on. When your offense scores that many points, you should win a postseason game, especially against the playoff team with a quarterback of Blake Bortles, who was struggling and probably won't be back after this one season with the Jaguars. So Blake Bortles is gone. There, that shows you what they think of him. Didn't even start all their games this year. But a Blake Bortles-led Jaguars offense ran up and down the field against you. So last year, it was Todd Haley who got fired, Todd Haley who got the blame, Todd Haley who got the venom. And Keith Butler was able to stay the course for one more season. Well, we go into this year, and I know it's now a full season with Ryan Shazier, and they didn't really replace him in the draft, and you really can't because he's such an impact player. But now, it's not just spotty start to try to replace him. Now it's a full season of getting an opportunity to try to replace him or correct that Band-Aid. And while that's incredibly difficult, you're still responsible for what goes on. And Keith Butler and the Pittsburgh Steelers defense let the team down yet again. I get that it maybe played better than expectations based on the fact they didn't do much in the draft, based on not having Ryan Shazier for a full season. However, that doesn't really matter in terms of overall production, because I get the expectations were low, and I get that might give you a reprieve in some scenarios, and maybe that's why he's going to stick around now. But the buck got to stop with somebody. Somebody got to get blamed for what went wrong with the Steelers defense. And generally speaking, when you're in an offseason off of a disappointing year, and the coach and Mike Tomlin talks about all the change that's going to come to pass, which there has been change. There's absolutely been change. Joey Porter being fired, linebackers coach with the Steelers. A lot of controversy over Joey Porter in terms of maybe splitting the locker room. Some Steelers are denying those reports, but those were reports that were coming out from Steelers media. So he's gone. Even going to the other side of the ball, James Saxon, he's gone. Running backs coach. That was after last week's show. Fired by the Pittsburgh Steelers. And talk about expectations. Didn't have Le'Veon Bell this year. Had James Conner have a Pro Bowl season, and had Samuels fill right in when needed towards the end of the year as a quality running back. Now, I get their overall ranks and overall run production weren't where you'd want for an offense to be fully versatile and fully balanced, but based on what he had to deal with, was that a fair firing? If you're going to say give Keith Butler one more year because of Ryan's year being out and because of expectations, then why do you fire the running backs coach? They knew all this Le'Veon Bell drama in the offseason. There was many thoughts that he wasn't going to be missing many of these games this past year, even if not, maybe some didn't think the whole year, as that asinine drama really erupted. But it was widely believed he was going to miss at least the first 10 games. Not many thought James Conner was going to become an all-pro. The offensive line blocked well and played well. And James Conner became a Pro Bowl running back with all those 100-plus yard games and the touchdowns. And, yeah, there were some games that he floundered. But his first year as a starter, getting all the carries, and he became a Pro Bowler. Why does that not dictate or does not reflect on Saxon if you're going to go off expectations for Keith Butler to try to defend him? Point of it is, I'm fine with Saxon being fired. I'm fine with Joey Porter being fired. Mike Tomlin called for change. And as I detailed on several shows already and been detailing for years of my career in media and really even before, and really I'll scream it from the rooftops anywhere I can while you guys ignore me anyway, Mike Tomlin's not going to be fired. So since you're not going to fire your head coach, who has won you a championship, has been to 2, has won you several division titles, was in the playoffs just a season ago with 13 victories, and while we all agree this was a very disappointing season with all the talent around the Pittsburgh Steelers, this is a franchise and the Rooney family that allowed Bill Cowher to stick around for several years in a row, missing the playoffs, that allowed Chuck Noll to hang around for a decade plus of mediocrity after his dynasty. So they don't fire coaches. In fact, the Rooney family has never fired coaches. So we know they're not going to fire Mike Tomlin, and we'll leave that debate for another day, but we know they're not going to fire Mike Tomlin. So if you agree with me they're not going to fire Mike Tomlin, and it's evident they're not going to do that now, based on it yet to happen so far here in the offseason, then you'd want the rest of the change. He wants change. He even said some self-reflection, maybe having his Tom Coughlin period of maybe having to change, Coughlin being too strict, having to loosen things up, and it led to success in championships with the Giants. Well, Tomlin maybe now, with all the talent and underachieving despite the Super Bowl 10 years ago, maybe he now needs to actually get stricter. Maybe that was part of the punishment of Antonio Bryan or Antonio Brown. And maybe that would lead to Antonio Brown actually being traded, because from Mike Tomlin in that press conference to end the season that I attended, it absolutely appeared that Mike Tomlin was fed up with the crap and the drama that is fueled by Antonio Brown. But maybe that will go on. But he's not going to get fired, and he's going to have a chance to do that. So all the assistants can go. Joey Porter can go. Whether he was dividing the locker room or not, let's change. He can go. James Saxon, understanding expectations, understanding not having Le'Veon Bell and the success of James Conner, the overall production from the position wasn't there, and he can go. It's a meaningless situation. He can go, replace the running back coach. Fine. But if you really want to make the change, and Mike Tomlin's not going to go, then Keith Butler is where you look. Keith Butler is who then should go. Look it up there, Pittsburgh Sports Live. Subscribe to us on the YouTube channel. Find us, SteelersNow.com, our new website in the Pittsburgh Sports Now family, because my last show, my last episode here of Mic Drop, Joey Porter gone, more Steelers change coming. There was more change that happened after Joey Porter. That was Saxon. There's been change. Get to the whole Mike Munchak thing in another show, but Mike Munchak interviewing for other jobs, it appeared he was going to go. It now appears he will potentially be back with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the offensive line was wonderful, so that's a positive for this team to actually keep him. But in that show, and again now, and that is where I thought the change would be. I was expecting Keith Butler would be fired as defensive coordinator, and that would be part of the change. I was expecting Keith Butler would be let go, and he's been the defensive coordinator since 2015. So it's not just last year. It's not just this year. He's had some years with Ryan Shazier, and the defense didn't perform. The defense has been a weak spot of this team for years. It just has. It cost them a playoff game last year. It hasn't performed this season. The defense underperformed this season. The defense collapsed, allowing 16 points and a comeback to the Los Angeles Chargers. Steelers with a 16-point lead, and that defense collapsed against the Chargers. You can point to referees all you want, and there's a show I did why you shouldn't blame the referees for the entire season, despite some blown calls. And I get the defense played well against the Patriots, for example. But the defense collapsed against the Chargers, blowing that game. That's on the defense. And any of these single games could have cost them the postseason this year. That's how close they were. The defense played horrible against the Oakland Raiders on the road. The offense made their mistakes, but the defense was bad. That was a loss if they had back. Could have been a postseason season. So there are ways you can point to the defense and blame the defense for the year. And if you're going to do that, then you go at Keith Butler. Regardless of everything else, when you're in an offseason of change and disappointment with all this talent and you're commanding change, it's really shocking to me how Mike Tomlin can say that and then retain Keith Butler. He has to be the guy to go. Todd Haley was a scapegoat last year. Used Keith Butler as your scapegoat this season. Now, while Keith Butler has to go, and it appears by reports, throw it up there again, Jeremy Fowler, it appears he's not going to go. It appears it'll be another year of Keith Butler, and granted, it'll be the last year in his contract, and he probably won't be retained. Might be the similar situation with Mike Tomlin as head coach. They're not going to fire him, but when his contract runs out, they just won't re-sign him or give him a new deal if the Steelers continue to disappoint. But we get that with head coaches. We get that off Mike Tomlin's track record, or at least you should. Keith Butler doesn't have it. Keith Butler's track record has not been successful on his exact job with the Steelers. But if you're going to fire Keith Butler, and here's the reason why I'd love to fire Keith Butler now more than ever. Last week I called for Marvin Lewis. Many of you got on me for that. I called for Marvin Lewis to replace Keith Butler as defensive coordinator. I understand Marvin Lewis has been Bengals head coach for a decade, 15 years, decade plus. And I understand the 7 playoff appearances and no playoff victories, but he's also won a Super Bowl as head up of maybe the greatest defense of all time, or one of it, with the 85 Bears, the 2000 Ravens. So he's been a championship-level defensive coordinator. His defenses with the Bengals still really weren't the problem there, even when they eventually became a train wreck and didn't get those playoff victories. So he could be an option. You didn't like that? Okay. I got another option for you. You don't want Marvin Lewis? Fine. And it doesn't appear that's going to happen. It appears he'll probably take a year or so off. I don't know if his NFL career is over, and maybe he wants another head coaching job, which probably won't be offered to him, at least not for this season. But if that's not going to happen, maybe because of the rivalry or whatever it is, some comments he's made in the past, I got another one for you. He's available too. Gregg Williams. Gregg Williams is a long-time defensive coordinator in this league. And Gregg Williams just worked wonders as interim head coach of the Cleveland Browns. Gregg Williams was part of the change there in Cleveland after Hugh Jackson finally got fired. Winless season a year ago, not getting it done to start this season again. Granted, Baker Mayfield didn't start the year as the starter and eventually became the starter. His emergence and his success absolutely led to the Browns turning things around. and having a quality season, especially off the expectations and especially off of the year they had the previous year, going 0-16. And Gregg Williams really got tapped into there. He did a great job. Been a great defensive coordinator throughout his career. Great defensive coordinator throughout his career. Championship-level defensive coordinator as well. Been on a Super Bowl staff. And here's the emotions of Gregg Williams there with the Cleveland Browns. Wanted to personally thank and reach out to all of the Cleveland Brown fans, the people of Cleveland. Happy about living there. He still wants you to root for the team. You can go ahead and read for yourself. Did a great job as interim head coach of the Cleveland Browns. I would actually give him a look and considered him for the real job. That's not where they went, and he's gone now. But he's available. Needs a job again. Again, probably not going to get a head coaching opportunity despite his success there as an interim head coach. Most of his resume has been as a defensive coordinator. Again, where most of his success has been. There are many guys out there. Norv Turner is a perfect example throughout the history of the league that are great coordinators, offense or defense, but don't really get it done usually as a head coach. Now, Gregg Williams did a great job again with the Browns as an interim head coach, but he's not really a head coach guy for the long haul. I might have gave him the opportunity. They did not. But his track record has not been successful when he's really been a head coach for a long period of time. And they didn't really appear that any rumblings that they were going to go in that direction. And maybe that's why. And I doubt he'll get many other head coaching opportunities in the future. He's kind of typecasted as a defensive mind, a defensive genius, a guy who can help your defense be a championship caliber defense. Did it with the Saints. He's a defensive wizard. One of the greatest defensive coordinators this league has ever seen, based on resume, based on what we've seen in his track record, is Gregg Williams. He's now available, guys. Gregg Williams is available. And the Steelers are going to still hold on to Keith Butler? We've seen several years of Keith Butler and the defense underperforming or not getting it done. And there's talent on that defense, even though maybe it's not what you'd want. It's not a steel curtain defense, but there's talent on that defense. He maybe had less to work with the Browns and was able to turn things around there. That defense also played well, in addition to the whole team, when he became interim head coach. But the Steelers need to bring in Gregg Williams. I actually like this more than even Marvin Lewis. I'd be fine with Marvin Lewis, and I know that's not going to happen, and none of you seem to want it. I got flack for that, which I don't mind. But his resume commands it, and I understand the personalities and the issues personally with some comments he's made, why the players may not like it. So, okay. And Gregg Williams is from another rival. He's from Cleveland. He's coming off the Browns, but it's a brief period. It's only half a year as an interim head coach. There was no crazy comments that he's made. There's no crazy things that have happened while he was leading the Browns against the Steelers, just the history of the rivalry. So there's no similar issues there that you maybe would have with Marvin Lewis. And while I'd tell the team to kind of shut up since you've underachieved, and you really can't call shots there, but Marvin Lewis isn't going to happen anyway. No reports are going in that direction. I'd be fine with it, but it's just probably not going to happen. Gregg Williams, though, I've seen media members call for him, and I'm going to jump on this wagon. Gregg Williams is even a more recently successful defensive coordinator in this league. It hasn't been 15 years since he's been a defensive coordinator, coming off of so many years as a head coach for Marvin Lewis. It's not really going to be a step down for him since he was just an interim guy. He's been one of the most successful defensive coordinators in this league. Absolutely. In this era, too. So he's not just riding off of Ray Lewis and the greatest defense of all time and a different cast of characters as a coordinator so many years ago. He's doing it now with this era of player and doing it maybe with less talent. You could argue Gregg Williams has achieved equal or greater success than Marvin Lewis in his overall NFL career as a head coach with lesser talent around him. So that brings up Gregg Williams again. Gregg Williams is who the Steelers should bring in as their defensive coordinator. Be done with Keith Butler. Gregg Williams now available. Gone from the Browns. He's now a guy who would be, I'm sure, wildly convinced to come to Pittsburgh, to come to a history of that defense, to come to an historic marquee franchise, where the Steelers still are, with a lot of talent still there, and in the midst of all their drama, I get it. It's annoying to me too, and it's absolutely part of the problem. But in the midst of all their drama, still one of the most talented teams in the National Football League. And while they underachieved this year for sure, a season ago they won 13 games with that same group. So it can be done. It can be done. And I'm sure Gregg Williams would see the Steelers as an attractive destination to work under another defensive guy in Mike Tomlin, to be able to learn from each other, Gregg Williams and Mike Tomlin, to be able to man up and to lead a historic franchise with a pedigree of successful defenses, even going back to 2008, half of that season and that Super Bowl championship. So Gregg Williams would be a perfect fit for the Steelers, and I think he'd be interested too. But instead, the Steelers are going to retain Keith Butler off a good conversation him and Tomlin have. What did he tell him? Did he make excuses? Tomlin doesn't usually like that. That's what he tells us in the media. Doesn't make excuses. Well, what did Keith Butler do? Did he make excuses? Say what he could do better? And I'm not saying the guy should never get a job again. I don't like calling for guys to be fired. I understand they're supporting their families, and I wouldn't want somebody to call for me to be fired and me to lose my credential here in media. But there's a body of work now that says Keith Butler's not getting it done. You want change? Well, that's an option. And it's an option you should take, especially since the head coach isn't going to be gone. Fire Keith Butler. Keith Butler has to go. Find some way to part ways. And bring in Gregg Williams. Gregg Williams should be the new defensive coordinator with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Why not? Give it a shot. He's had a track record of success in that job. Maybe it'll add to the Browns' rivalry. Maybe it'll dig into them a little bit. Maybe an added bonus. There has been change. I knew the Mike Tomlin change was never going to happen. I said that to all of you for the longest time. But separate from that, there's been change. But there's one prominent, if you want to make a prominent change, like Tomlin kind of said, that's firing Keith Butler. That's a new defensive coordinator. And that's bringing in a guy like Gregg Williams. Gregg Williams should be the next defensive coordinator with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Reports are, though, Keith Butler going to stay. So while it's been an offseason of change already, newly into this offseason, it's a little disappointing in some of the changes. Some of the changes aren't big. There's small changes, minor changes, which is what I kind of always figured they were going to do, but hoped for more. And I've defended Tomlin for years. I think some of you undervalue him. You don't understand the history of the franchise. You don't understand they don't fire head coaches. And you don't understand his proper comparison and context to Cowher and Chuck Noll and what his really legacy is and success he has had, and how not many besides Bill Belichick have been more successful head coaches in this league in the past decade plus. But then around him there needs to be change, and he even said that while he self-reflects. Keith Butler needed to be that change, and it wasn't made, and it doesn't appear it's going to be made, but Gregg Williams is available now, and you still want to keep Keith Butler? Come on. Come on. Give me that. Come on, man. Come on, man. Gregg Williams is the perfect fit as defensive coordinator with the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers should salivate over a chance for Gregg Williams. I wouldn't have minded Marvin Lewis, but Gregg Williams is now the guy. Gregg Williams is now available. Gregg Williams is who the Steelers should bring in to be the defensive coordinator. That would be a big splash move, and that would be a prominent piece of change for the Pittsburgh Steelers, as they say was going to be what their offseason was about. If they want prominent change, if they want an offseason about big change is bringing in Gregg Williams. Big change, the defensive coordinator change, and bringing in an arguable assistant legend, defensive coordinator, Hall of Fame type in Gregg Williams for at least that position. That would be prominent change around the Steelers. But reports are Keith Butler to stay. Give it one more shot. So we'll see. Gregg Williams, though, available. Gregg Williams, the perfect fit. Gregg Williams should be the defensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Want to remind you again to subscribe to us on YouTube. We got an influx of subscribers lately. I don't know if it's our increase of views or drama around these teams, our ability to really hit what's asinine around Pittsburgh sports, because that's been the case, although Dan and I kind of switched. There was Penguin drama, Penguin disappointment. The Steelers were okay. Seemed like they were going to be a playoff team when they were 7-2-1. All of a sudden, that switches, and the Steelers disappoint. They don't make the playoffs. They underachieve with their talent, and there are all kinds of drama with Antonio Brown and company. And now the Penguins have seemingly figured it out. Matt Murray posting shutouts. They're dominating games. Nothing's perfect, but Sidney Crosby playing well, and Penguin team certainly going to be a playoff team, if not more. Now they're one of the Cup favorites again. So Dan now has that, but we'll see. It'll be a circle. There's always drama and opportunity for the Yinzers to Yins in Pittsburgh with their teams. So find us, PittsburghSportsNow.com. Find us, Pittsburgh Soccer Now. Find us at Pittsburgh Hockey Now. And now our new venture here where this show will live and all our Steelers content with Pittsburgh Sports Live can go and be found on our new venture of SteelersNow.com. Follow us on Twitter at PGH Sports Live on Twitter. There it is for the graphic. Follow us on Twitter at PGH Sports Live on Twitter. Also follow Steelers Now at PGH Steelers Now on Twitter, which is the new Twitter account in our family of social media empire that we've been building. Our accounts there off the Steelers Now website. And make sure to subscribe. Click subscribe button for Pittsburgh Sports Live on YouTube. PGHSportsLive.com as well, where all our content can be found. Our audio and video content can be found. The site that I run here for the family. Steelers, more change could be coming. I can't eliminate the possibility of Keith Butler still getting fired and maybe Gregg Williams or somebody coming in, but it doesn't appear likely now. So if I had to give this offseason a grade so far, it's a C+. There's been change. There had to be. These are obvious moves, though. No big deal, really. One move was obvious and could have easily been made, and there are options to really, really fill it. And that's firing Keith Butler and replacing with the Marvin Lewis or with a Gregg Williams, and I already knew the Tomlin answer, so C+. Can't go more unless we can make a change in defensive coordinator. Should have been done last year, but I will digress. And maybe the Steelers will better conquer their offseason off of my analysis there. But as they try to do that, I will continue to conquer sports radio one day. Get my little graphic up there for my Twitter account at MikeAsti11. Follow me there on Twitter, but one day at a time.